Bobby Lopez here. Just wanted to go over a portion of our webinar on wedges and sole bounce. Of course, you can see that webinar in our webinar section. But we did a fitting. Well, really not the fitting. It was a follow-up fitting. When we do golf clubs, we fit the golfer, and then once the golf clubs arrive, we do a follow-up fitting to make sure everything's right. I don't care what company you buy from. They're all within a tolerance, so the lie angle could be off by a degree or two. Lofts, all those things need to be bent. But we had a good friend of ours and a student that was having a little trouble in which the 6-iron was absolutely perfect at impact and the wedge was not. Yet the lie angles were proper on both. So this will answer some of that for you in case you run through the same problem. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty here, but if you're trying to get good, this is important. You have to understand first what bounce is on the golf club and understand how the sole is designed and there's a purpose for it. The two most important things on the golf club are the sole and the shaft. Now, when you talk about bounce, it's really a roundness on the bottom of the sole, and understand that the bounce on each club is actually different. They're not all the same. They're built for the proper angle of attack for that golf club into the golf ball. Some lie angles, that's why when somebody asks me, so where's the ball belong on my stance? I says, I don't know. Who made the clubs? Because how the sole was designed determines where that ball should be in your stance. Now, right here, we're going to look at a zero bounce golf club, meaning it is perfectly flat in the sole. I can tell you Jack Nicklaus wasn't far from that, and he would use a very, very thin sole, a very little bounce because he was a picker. He would just barely hit the ground when he hit a shot. He wasn't cutting a very big divot, whereas to the contrary, Tiger Woods has more of a rounded sole because he digs down into the ground a little more. All right, so here we have what you'd call, we'll just go over a couple little terms here real quick. The leading edge is right here. This is called the trailing edge. This is your center point or contact point on this particular golf club. It's perfectly flat. So now let's pretend, it sort of looks like a wedge anyway, but let's say, and that's where this picture's not showing an accurate portrayal, because with a wedge, the club is going to be leaning forward in the shaft just by design in order for that club to be flat. See? So what happens if you lean your hands in front even more? Now this area right here, the leading edge is going to dig down and the trailing edge is going to come up. And that club's going to go poof, stick into the ground, and you have a hard time finishing your divot, or you're going to dig one all the way down to China. The contrary will happen over here. What happens if your hands are behind the ball, like you would more on maybe a sand shot or a flop shot or something like that? Then the trailing edge is going to come down, the leading edge is going to go up. All right, so here you have a pretty good idea of it. Let's pretend that a golf club is designed where this portion right here, instead of it being totally flat like that, they grind off that portion right there so that now instead of that reaching the ground at the same position in the hands, where here they're showing straight up and down, which is rare, your club would be touching right there in the trailing edge, where if they ground off some of the rear portion here, now the leading edge is sticking on the ground. Now, let's come over here and see. Here is a little better portrayal, I think. Here they're showing a 4-degree forward of the hands, which gives you a zero bounce if your club only has 4 degrees bounce on it. So let's look at the typical, well, no, not really typical 60-degree wedge, which you're going to use more for flop shots and stuff, is going to be closer to 6 to 8 degrees worth of bounce. I like it at 4. If I can get it at 0, I take it. But understand, the less the bounce, the more accurate you have to be as far as ball impact. You have to be right on the money, because if you hit even an inch behind it with a 4-degree lofted golf club, that club's going to stick right in the ground and you're going to be in trouble. You're going to have a lot of dirt between you and the ball. All right? And that's not good if you're going to put any backspin on it. Now, here is what has been nicknamed bounce. It's actually radius. So here you've got this radius build into the base of the golf club, which means now let's say we put our hands a little more forward at impact. We've got some shaft lean going forward. This leading edge is going to head down, and he's got some room because they've built some radius. Same thing going the other way. Now the trailing edge isn't going to drag on you as much because we've ground some of the edge off of that and made it round. Here's a good example for you right here. More towards the leading edge, more towards the trailing edge. Here's zero bounce, right on the money. Now, understand that when you're hitting, let me see if we have that in the next, yeah. This is like one of those old Andy Wilson Sandy Andys. Unless you're old like me, you won't remember these. And it was a great sand wedge as a sand wedge. Now, you've got a huge amount of bounce here. We might say that's, whoops, I can't draw straight with this stupid thing. Let's pretend, I can't measure this right now, but let's say that's 11 degrees from what is 0. Okay, now, so we're going to have a very serious trailing edge here. Big old lump on the back. And that's real good for sand because you don't want that leading edge. You don't want a knife going into the sand. It's going to stick. It's probably why they came up with the term bounce, because it sort of bounces. I don't know. But either way, you got a big trailing edge here. Now, what happens if you're on firm ground and you're opening that club face a little bit and trying to hit a flop shot, and you've got this big old dunce cap on the back of it right here? You're going to blade that ball all the way across the green. So don't get mad at yourself. It's not your fault. You just had the wrong tool. Jack Nicklaus couldn't get up under that ball with that because if the ground is hard, there's nowhere for the lump to go. Now, if he was on some fairly thick grass in the rough or something, and the ball stood up a little bit, not a problem at all because there's room for the lump to go. There's room underneath the ball. All right? Capiche? Now, a club like this also, you can put your hands pretty well forward. You take a club with a bunch of bounce on it, you can go pretty well forward and not have a problem at all. So you've got to get this leading edge down in order to hit, but it's going to have to be a low rolling chip shot. It can't be a flop shot. Now, here's what you need to do if you want to do a flop shot kind of thing. You look at this wedge right here, and this is the Adams. And to be fair, let you know I'm a Callaway staff player, but I want to show you some other clubs too. Right here, look at this right here. See this? It's been ground off so that when you take that wedge and open it up some, and notice right here, this is a good wedge, 60 degrees, loft 4 degrees, bounce. These Adams wedges, I mean, I'm not a big Adams fan because most of their products are geared towards what they call, game improvement, which I don't think that's game improvement in the first place. But I'll tell you what, these Watson wedges are excellent. They make a real nice wedge. That's probably Tom Watson's influence there. And I bet this is very similar to what he uses, if not exactly what he uses. You see right over here how much he's ground off on that heel? I'm sure that's because that's just the way he needs it. Look at this right here. By comparison, here, this Titleist, which is a 56 degree, 11 degrees loft. Here's a 64, another good choice. Notice how much is ground off over here. That's so when you take that wedge and you lay it open because you want to hit a little flop shot, there is no lump there. The lump has been ground off, so there's only 4 degrees worth of bounce. Here, there's 11. So when you lay this golf club open over here on the left, especially on hard ground, the leading edge is going to be up off the ground. You're going to hit the center of the ball. You're going to blade it across the green into the water. Capiche now? So it's very, very important that you understand sole configuration on a wedge and the kind of ground you're playing on. And Georgia's one kind of ground, and Washington's another kind of ground. Germany has another kind of ground. That's why you really need to be carrying wedges with different sole configurations where the sole fits the golf course you're playing and the kind of ground you're playing on. You can only play with 14 clubs, but it doesn't mean that you can't have more than 14 clubs that you own, and toss out the clubs you don't want for any particular situation. Here's the new Callaway Wedges. In case you don't know, Roger Cleveland. The Cleveland wedge is a very, very, very popular wedge. Roger sold the business and moved over to Callaway, and he's been designing the wedges in Callaway, and boy, have their wedges improved. Unbelievable. You see, he's got this well-rounded kind of sole right here where he's just blended. Let's go back to previous here. He has blended what you see here. Let me get all this garbage off of there. See how here it's flat, and then they ground this back so that you could lay the club open. On his, he blended that so it's all one continuous slope. Right? So, here's the important part. When you're going to buy a wedge, you need to see someone that knows something about wedges. And you need to be able to go outside and hit a couple of sample wedges and see what really works for you. More than anything, let's say if I were selling you a wedge, I could watch you hit some wedge shots, and I know right away about what kind of configuration you ought to have for the way you play a wedge shot. Because remember, there's two things you're going to hit, the ball and the ground. And how that club goes through the ground is vital. And your angle of attack needs to match the sole configuration that you have. So sometimes you can get lucky. You just buy a wedge out of a barrel or something that turns out to be the greatest wedge you ever had. You just got lucky. I mean, it isn't like there's infinite number of combinations of sole configurations. Although, with really good players, which is what we saw right here with the Tom Watson wedge, good players will grind off little areas of interest there, and that's because they've got to get. Oops, let me see. Where's the point? There we go. See, he's only grounded off right here. Rest of this is flat, and then notice if you go here like this, all this was actually ground down off of what would be the original sole of the golf club. And that's to accommodate his angle of attack and how he plays a wedge shot. All right? So I hope this helped you out some, and that you realize that the actual sole of the golf club is very important. Understand what it is. So at least now when you walk into a place and you say, hey, I want to get a wedge, and the guy says, what do you want, 8 degrees or 11 degrees? You at least know what they're talking about. And also, if you put some, here's getting back to our friend here that got club, if you put some lie angle tape on the bottom, impact tape, it's really paper, I don't want to call it tape except that it sticks, and hit some shots, and you notice that with your 6-iron, you're hitting it right in the center, but with your wedge, you're hitting it way over here. Well, the reason being is the wedge was designed for your hands to be further ahead. The 6-iron is designed more straight up and down. 2-iron is probably straight up almost, just barely. Probably your hands are just barely in front of the ball, where with a wedge, your hands should be more in front of the ball. The ball should be further back in your stance, but your hands don't go there too. Your hands stay where they were with a 2 or 3-iron. So that's why, boy, the 6-iron, it's perfect. The wedge, it's not. It's because this trailing edge, the bounce on the trailing edge is getting to the ground first, and not only is that causing you to hit the ball lower on the face, but it's also causing the club to torque on you as you're hitting the shot. It could open up a little bit, and ball starts going a little bit to the right. Okay, hope this helps. Bobby Lopez here, signing off. Give me a call anytime. Here we are right here. Give me a call, send me an email. I'm always around to talk about golf anytime.